On September 17th or 18th, depending on your time zone, we've got a full moon and partial lunar eclipse in Pisces. The exact time is 10:34 p.m. Eastern U.S. time on September 17th, so calculate that for your own time zone. But as with any eclipse, the energies tend to build up for a while in advance, and then they tend to last for like 6 months afterwards. So the exact moment of this full moon is less of a concern than it sometimes is, just because the energies are actually more powerful. So this one is unusual in the sense that it is conjunct Neptune in Pisces, and Neptune, of course, rules Pisces. So that kind of adds to this extra thin veil, extra boundaryless kind of watery Pisces energy that we're getting at the time of the eclipse. It's also kind of beginning a new cycle of eclipses. The last time that we had eclipses in the Virgo Pisces range was in 2016, 2017, and now we're getting into before the North Node shifts officially in January of 2025 from Aries to Pisces. We're kind of getting a bit of a preview in mid-September. So keep an eye out. We've still got that North Node in Aries causing all of the drum beats of war, all of this kind of aggression, this anger that's brewing up all over society right now. That's all very much North Node in Aries. But with this eclipse moving into Pisces, we get more of a peaceful energy, more of a high spiritual energy instead of that kind of Aries ego, like go, 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 what's my way? We get more of the dissolution of the ego, the dissolving of all of those sharp, angry edges. And so there is quite a magical and healing energy to this eclipse. The sun point in Virgo is actually quincunx Chiron in Aries, and so we get this kind of tension, but also an opportunity for extra healing. So I'm going to get into the Sabian Symbol here, and then we'll take things and really unpack what's happening. So the Sabian Symbol for this one is Pisces 26 degrees, we round up. Watching the very thin moon crescent appearing at sunset, different people realize that the time has come to go ahead with their different projects. So instead of this energy that we've been having of kind of like my way or the highway, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you have this opinion, you have this reality, great. Go your way. You have this opinion, this reality, you go your way. So we're having this kind of bifurcation of timelines, but it's more than that. It's kind of really like a separation of realities and stuff that has been brewing for a long time. Eclipses always kind of signify some kind of an ending. In this case, it's an ending of an era in a way, because at this time we've got in the background Pluto in the final degree of Capricorn. I've talked about this in other videos, but this is background energy that is also sextiling this eclipse. So Pluto's at 29 Capricorn, the eclipse is at between 25 and 26 degrees of Pisces. Neptune is at late 28 degrees Pisces. So we have this harmonious energy from Pluto, this conjunction from Neptune, and then the other outer planet, Uranus, is right around 27 degrees of Taurus right now. So we get this kind of double sextile energy to the eclipse from outer planets. And kind of the way that I read that is with Uranus involved, we're having this opportunity to liberate ourselves. And so if the freedom energy, if the promise of some kind of liberation and expansion energy is not enough to kind of urge the changes forward, then we've got kind of the deep, dark, big, ugly of Pluto and Capricorn really showing us the corruption, the problems with the top-down authority, the problems with the old structures, the old ways of being. So it's kind of like we can do this the nicer way or we can do this the rougher way, but one way or another, it's going to happen. With Neptune, oftentimes you can have, the positive is like the highest level of love, the highest unconditional compassion, the urge to beautify everything around. And that can tap into things like, fairy glamour. It can tap into beautiful art projects, beautiful music, poetry, but also what kind of a life are you creating? Like what would make your life more beautiful? That is available at this time with this eclipse because, again, the veils are so thin. It's kind of like, ooh, anything could happen because it's like extra weird, extra wonky. But the downside of Neptune and Pisces is this illusion, the delusion, kind of like, oh, I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid and I'm going to drink so much Kool-Aid. And then I'm going to be like really pleased that I have drunk the Kool-Aid and it's the best Kool-Aid ever. And then, vampires? Oh, gee, I'll invite you across the threshold. So it's like normally you can't just have things come into your home, like a vampire force, for example. But with that Neptune energy, it's like, oh, gee, I'll just invite you in. And so there is this kind of surreal quality of not just in the physical, tangible world, but also like, what are you inviting in from the other realms? Because the spiritual energies are going to be very magnified at this time. And it's just something to keep in mind that with that Virgo Pisces axis, we need to have more discernment. And so it is a good time for prayer. It's a good time for centering yourself before you go out into the world because the energies in the world are kind of chaotic right now. But the energies inside ourselves could be a mixture of that, right? Like we have things that come up. Pluto is dredging up the last bits of the old structures. That's not just politics and religion and corporations. That's also the last vestiges of our own structures in our lives. And some of those structures don't really serve us that well, right? Some of them are old family structures that maybe have worn out their welcome. Some of them are old friendship structures, like the way that relationships work. And so we're moving into a phase where the bullying, the narcissism, the control, the coercion is not going to fly anymore. But we're not quite out of that period yet. So this is this kind of liminal space at the time of the eclipse where we've got kind of the two realities unfolding. So there may be glimpses of the new, glimpses of something that is very light, that feels very beautiful and airy, but watery and in the flow. You may see flickers of that at this time, and then much more so in January. So it's kind of like a preview. If you don't like what you are seeing, use this time between mid-September and mid-January of next year to really make some course corrections in your life. If you need to shore up boundaries, if you find that no matter how much you want to put a happy spin on something, it's just not working anymore, that's a message. And it doesn't have to be a whole big trauma drama, but the nice thing about Neptune and Pisces is that there's this energy of like erosion, of gentle release. And it's just kind of like the waves they keep crashing, but they just kind of take the stuff away. And so there can be cleansing tears of grief. Neptune's also connected with that. But also, again, that kind of higher love, that highest romantic energy is also possible at this time. Also, the unconditional compassion. It's just going to be tricky. And this is where I'm saying discernment is important because you don't want to be inviting vampires into your home, right? They need to be invited. And with these kinds of energies, it can be kind of like you feel inspired to just have anything go, and this is not quite the time for that. So that's the eclipse itself. There are some interesting things happening, especially with the nodal axis, which I'm going to get to in a moment. But one other thing to mention at the time of this eclipse is we've got Circe at 29 degrees Pisces. And that just really adds to this kind of fairy realm, illusion, delusion. Circe was kind of considered like a lesser god in Greek mythology. She was the daughter of Helios, the sun, so like real high lineage there, but then also the daughter of a nymph. And so she wasn't like a full-on goddess, and she got exiled for casting spells, and she continued to cast spells. And some of those spells were protective, some of them were to kind of create an illusion, create a mirage so that she, as a single woman living alone on an island, would not be, raped and pillaged by people that were coming to her island. But sometimes she could be a little vindictive with the spells. And so this is a tricky energy. This is not just a neutral energy, but it is something that if you are wanting to put out intentions, if you have a vision, if you've had dreams, if you're keeping dream journals and noting like, ooh, there's a story unfolding here, then that Circe's energy can help to bring some of that into being. But just to be aware that the negative side of this eclipse is that we are likely to see the media spin cycle, the social media spin cycle just so high, the illusions so crazy that on the one hand, people are like, I can't believe anybody's falling for this stuff anymore. On the other hand, people that are just proudly, chugging back the Kool-Aid. So just, that's there. But as I mentioned, there's some really interesting stuff happening with the nodal axis. So the North Node, South Node axis, Aries, Libra. The North Node at this time is at 6 of Aries, South Node at 6 Libra. At the time of the eclipse, we've got Mars in Cancer, 7 degrees Cancer, and so that is squaring the nodal axis. We've got the Aries Libra and then the Cancer. And then opposite that, at the Capricorn side of things, we've got a whole bunch of stuff happening at 7 to 8 degrees of Capricorn. So just unpacking some of these energies. Mars in Cancer, that's a background energy. The exact square to the nodal axis from Mars happens the day before the eclipse, but it's going to be kind of in range. It's already in range. I'm recording this on the 9th. So if there's major events that have taken place since the 9th and I'm not mentioning them, that's why. But Mars, whenever you have Mars involved with the nodal axis in any way, but especially a square, because Mars likes a square, it's like a challenge, then there's a course correction. In this case, a collective course correction. We're looking at that energy of Aries, which Mars rules, and the energy of Libra. So this war versus peace, this my way versus the harmony with other relationships, this I'm just going to go ahead versus some kind of negotiation. And then we've got Mars in emotional, family-oriented Cancer. Also Mars in Cancer, kind of like a mama bear energy, kind of stirring up the trouble there, kind of forcing the issue like, oh, you can't just kind of go along and just sweep stuff under the rug right now because Mars demands action. And with Mars in Cancer, one of the ways that we feel the need for action is like the emotions that start coming up, the feelings that start erupting from us where things just can feel intolerable. And so it's like, oh, we have to change. Or on the flip side, they feel so good. We're so passionate about them that it's like, oh, I can't afford to miss out on this opportunity. So that's Mars. But then opposite Mars, we've got Ceres. And Ceres is an asteroid connected with food, with diet. Ceres, Demeter, there's different ways of pronouncing these names, but Ceres, Demeter, they're the same goddess, one Greek, one Roman. But Ceres and her daughter Persephone or Proserpina, that's a whole story. I've spoken about this before, but Pluto/Hades kidnapped Persephone, Proserpina, took her into the underworld, raped her, and then made her a queen. But she ate a seed of a pomegranate, and so she wasn't allowed to leave. It's kind of like fairy realm stuff. Don't eat the food in the other realm because you could get stuck there. That's kind of what happened to Persephone. So Ceres, in her grief, was just, absolutely bereft and just wandering the earth, and it made it completely barren. So she's in charge of the harvest. She's in charge of the fertility of the land. And she was so depressed, so upset by what had been happening to her child that everything stopped. And so she was able to negotiate the release of her child. So another version of the energy with Ceres, in addition to food and diet and nourishment, is this, again, mama bear energy. So we're seeing echoes of this both with Mars and Cancer, but also with Ceres and Capricorn, the winter sign of Ceres, the barren sign of Ceres in a Cardinal Grand Cross. So when you have a Grand Cross, it looks like a square, and then if you made an X from each of the corners, there's like a point at each of those corners. And that's what we're looking at the time of this full moon. So it's not just Ceres, though. We've also got Isis right at 8 degrees Capricorn. And Isis has an energy of grief again. She lost her husband. So there's this death and rebirth energy connected with Isis, going into the underworld, collecting all of the pieces of her dead husband, Osiris, and resurrecting him. So there's this magical kind of energy, but again, this sort of death and rebirth energy happening, not just from Pluto in Capricorn sextiling the full moon eclipse, but also with this Ceres and Isis energy. And then we've got some even more interesting things going on. So we've got Quaoar, and that's Quaoar, Quaoar. That is a trans-Neptunian object, so way out there, and it kind of has the energy of like the best of Neptune and the best of Uranus combined. So we get like the psychic flash of insight of the Uranian component, and then we get this like unconditional love, like the highest, most amazing love, kind of like if you've ever listened to people that have had near-death experiences and they talk about being on the other side and they never experienced that kind of love before. It was just like all pervasive love. That's kind of what we're talking about with Quaoar. So yes, we've got that mama bear energy, that, grief, death, and rebirth kind of energy, but we've also got this like magical, miraculous energy. It doesn't mean that everything will necessarily change in an instant, but it means that it could. Like the potential for that is there with that flash of truth, that, instant download of amazing insights combined with this kind of awesome, like literally awesome kind of love. And then we've got Pholus, and Pholus is a centaur. I've spoken about Pholus before just because I track Pholus, in that I notice Pholus shows up all the time in like really key life events where it didn't really seem necessarily like such a big deal to begin with. But then afterwards, you get this kind of butterfly effect energy. So Pholus is the small thing, big effect centaur. And Pholus, at the time of this full moon lunar eclipse, is right at 7 degrees of Capricorn. So right in there, Quaoar, Pholus, Isis, Ceres, as the Capricorn end of this Cardinal Grand Cross. So again, you're talking about this sudden flash of insight with Quaoar, but then the small thing, big effect. It's almost like it doesn't take that sudden flash of insight. Everything is ripe for change anyway. Everything is ripe for this tiny little, moment that changes everything, but we don't necessarily recognize that it changed everything until some time has passed. And then in hindsight, you're able to go, okay, that was going on at that time. So you see the ripple effects. So one other thing with this Cardinal Grand Cross is that at 6 Cancer, so exactly squaring the nodal axis, but 1 degree away from Mars in Cancer, we've got Lachesis. And I have mentioned Lachesis before. She's one of the 3 Fate sisters. She is the one who's known as the allotter. And by allotter, we mean that she's the one who determines the length of a life. So there's, the spinner of the thread of life. There's the allotter who says, this is how long that thread is going to be. And then there is Atropos, who's the snipper, the cutter of the thread of life. And so at this time where we've got this, major cross, right? The Cardinal Grand Cross involving the nodal axis, we've also got one of the 3 Fate sisters who's determining how long things last. So we have Mars saying, yeah, now, we got to do it. We've got Pholus going, ooh, just a little tiny prick and boom, I'm off. We've got Quawa, this miraculous energy, and then we've got Ceres bringing the return of the harvest. We've got Isis bringing this regeneration, this resurrection energy, and we've got Lachesis involved saying, yeah, here's how long we're going to have to wait for that. And so it's not just the length of life, it's really the length of any situation. Like, how long can something continue? And so, eclipses are great release points. If you've had things in your life that have needed to go, with an eclipse in Pisces, again, that release energy is sometimes easier because it can just kind of evaporate or erode or kind of drift or fade away. It's a little less harsh than like an exact hit from Uranus, for example, or like the repeat tsunamis of Pluto. With Neptune and Pisces, you have an opportunity to just sort of go with the flow. But there are these really precise energies that are indicating that even if things look like it's going with the flow, even if things look like, just a gentle energy that is trying to become more peaceful, we are at a crossroads for humanity. And if you've got anything in the early cardinal signs, so Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, anything from, say, like 3 degrees of that to maybe 12 degrees, you're up right now. Like, things are up in your life because of this energy with the Grand Cross. And then just a few hours after the eclipse, which happens in late Pisces, the moon moves into Aries, and then the moon pops off that 6-degree, 7-degree point of Aries again and like reactivates this Grand Cross even stronger. So very powerful energies in effect. And just wanted to share that this is going to hit people in different ways. So back to the Sabian Symbol again, watching the very thin moon crescent appearing at sunset, different people realize that the time has come to go ahead with their different projects. And then Dane Rudyard adds a keynote, a keen appreciation of the value of individualized responses to any challenge of life. This should lead to a realization of the fallacy of totalitarianism. So this is one of the stories that just keeps showing up in the transits and the Sabian symbols as we go along. I know a lot of people are rightfully very concerned about kind of all the censorship happening, the like real, flexing of the old guard, flexing of the authority structures. It can look scary. It can look like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to get out of this? But the sky energies don't support it. The sky energies don't support long-term totalitarian dictatorship kind of energy. So this is an eclipse where we may see some of that bifurcation. It may become more obvious that we are between worlds, or that we are stepping into a different world, but maybe some of the other people that we know are not stepping into that same world. It's okay. Go with your flow. Go with where your emotions are consistently leading you. It's a great time for prayer. It's a great time to take a breath, or as my friend Tony used to say, take a breath of God, right? With Mars in Cancer, we're feeling that, ooh, I got to do it. I got to, push forward. I need to make the change right now. Be aware of that, but pay attention to timing, because again, eclipses tend to take 6 months to unfold anyway, but because this is kind of an out-of-sign eclipse where we're getting a little bit of a preview, some of that energy that we're moving towards may not really start to reveal itself until January, but you can keep an eye out for it. You can be looking, you can be feeling, and you can be repositioning yourself so that as these very large changes that are in the works, collectively and individually, as these things are unfolding, you are able to do it in the easiest, kindest, gentlest, go with the flow kind of way. You guys take care, and thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed to my channel, it really does help YouTube to push out the content more, and I always appreciate your comments, likes, and sharing the videos. It's very helpful. So thank you all. Peace. Bye.